jornada no Banco BAE. Fundado em 1996, o Banco BAE tem se dedicado a oferecer serviços bancários de excelência. A nossa trajetória é marcada pela inovação, integridade e compromisso com os nossos clientes. A nossa missão como empresa é agregar valor para o acionista de forma sustentável, disponibilizando uma oferta de excelência para os nossos clientes, garantindo assim a melhor experiência bancária em Angola. Ao longo dos anos, conquistamos marcos significativos, expandindo os nossos serviços e fortalecendo a nossa presença no mercado. Cada etapa desta jornada foi construída com a confiança dos nossos clientes e a dedicação da nossa equipa. Garantimos a nossa presença nacional e internacional com mais de 1000 pontos de atendimento espalhados por todo o país. Marcamos a nossa presença também em Portugal, Cabo Verde e São Tomé. Oferecemos ainda uma ampla gama de produtos e serviços, todos projetados para ajudar os nossos clientes a alcançar os seus objetivos financeiros. Olhamos para o futuro com entusiasmo, investindo em novas tecnologias e processos inovadores. Estamos comprometidos em continuar a liderar o setor bancário com soluções modernas e eficazes. Obrigado por fazer parte da nossa história. Juntos, vamos continuar a crescer e a inovar. Para mais informações, visite o nosso site www.bancobae.ao.
Thank you, His Excellency Mahamoud Ali Yusuf. I would like to invite to the stage His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the Africa Free Trade Continental Area, to make his special remarks. Immediately after his speech, we will play another short video by our diamond sponsor, Standard Bank.
Thank you very much, Madam Program Director. President João Manuel Lourenço, our gracious host, Your Excellencies, our heads of states and government, Your Excellency Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, the Chairperson of the Corporate Council on Africa, the CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, honorable ministers, leaders of the private sector, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me express my gratitude to His Excellency President Lourenço for the invitation to participate at this important business summit. I wish to commend the Corporate Council on Africa and the government of the Republic of Angola for the consistent effort over the last year to promote stronger trade ties and deepen economic integration between our two regions. As was expressed in very eloquent terms by His Excellency the Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, the world is confronting turbulent times, deepening geopolitical shifts, disruptions in global supply chains, trade rules that are applied unevenly. All of these challenges have a materially adverse impact on the trade and investment environment. AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, over the decades supported mutually beneficial trade and investment between the African continent and the United States. The investments that were made in AGOA over the decades benefited both smallholder farmers, factories, as well as US investors. As we accelerate the implementation of the AfCFTA, which has now been ratified by 49 members of the African Union, and trading is commencing within this regime, the objective for the African continent is to deepen continental integration, ensuring continuity and predictability of trade. particularly trade between the United States and African countries in the context of AGOA. This challenging moment calls for decisive and constructive US-Africa engagement to reinforce the global trading system, the multilateral trading rules that underpin the fairness of trade, open markets for avenues for sustainable development, and a rules-based system with the WTO at its core, protecting both large and small economies. Through the AFCFTA and under the wisdom of our heads of states, our continent is on a march where investment and trade in Africa is underpinned by a clear rules-based system with rules that help us to find solutions in trade and investment disputes in a manner that is orderly. The implementation of the AFCFTA is indeed an ambitious undertaking. It has to be ambitious because for too long, our continent has suffered from the effects of fragmentation and the effects of underdevelopment. A continent of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, youngest existing population, as well as attributes of positive economic growth as projected by the African Development Bank, certainly is open for business. As I mentioned, 49 state parties of the agreement establishing the AFCFTA. The foundation for transformational, trade-led growth across our continent certainly is there. The projected combined consumer and business spending by the year 2020 is set to be at $6.7 trillion. And by the year 2050, it is set to be at $16.1 trillion, presenting a unique and timely opportunity for US investors who seek to expand their investments across the African continent. The implementation of the AFCFTA, as well as other programs of the African Union, indeed position our continent to be resilient in these turbulent times and to have industrial-led growth on the back of green industrial investment. Our economic future cannot, of course, depend on trade alone. Production must be at the center of our strategy. Value addition of critical minerals, expansion of manufacturing capacity, and generation of sustainable jobs for our young people on the back of Africa's digital economy must be a priority. In this regard, our heads of states adopted in February this year the Digital Trade Protocol, a protocol that shall leverage on Africa's digital economy, positioning young Africans in particular, who are at the cutting edge of digital innovation to benefit from Africa's digital economy. The Protocol on Digital Trade harnesses a digital economy that the International Finance Corporation estimates that by the year 2035 shall be at over 700 billion United States dollars. We therefore, with the leadership of our heads of states, are determined to create opportunities for young Africans on the back of the digital economy. Let me conclude, Your Excellencies, by mentioning a few words on green industrialization. Here, in this regard, our heads of states have demonstrated the necessary leadership through the Nairobi Climate Declaration. The outcome of that first of its kind inaugural Green Industrialization Summit presented the world with an action plan for Africa's Green Industrialization Initiative, focusing on the processing of critical minerals, green manufacturing, green trade corridors such as the Lobito Corridor, and other initiatives that are intended not only to ensure low carbon transition, but also initiatives that are intended to ensure that through green trade, we create jobs whilst adhering to our environmental imperatives. In this era of the AFCFTA, the conditions for a more dynamic and mutually beneficial relationship between the United States and the African continent is indeed firmly in place. As I mentioned earlier, the AFCFTA provides this framework. We would, however, note that it is important to adhere to rules of trade. And as the African continent, we have done our part in defending multilateralism, in defending the multilateral trading system. We have adopted all of the rules of the WTO, imperfect as it may be, and we have adapted them to ensure that our conditions, peculiar conditions, are addressed. The multilateral trading system is Africa's only opportunity at fair trade and fair investment. Through our collective efforts, guided by clarity, purpose, and mutual respect, we believe that we have an opportunity to forge ahead in new US-Africa trade and investment relations with AGOA at its core. I want to thank all of you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Africa is our home. For over 160 years, we've paved the way, driven her growth. For where others see obstacles, we open doors. Where others pause, we keep pushing on and press beyond for more. For we are creatures of passion, and passion attracts ambition, and ambition fuels growth. It's what we're here for. For we choose to chase the hum of something greater, to stand where earth and ambition meets, to feel the weight of history beneath our feet, and leave footprints where the future speaks. For we choose to build, to transform, to be its change, its success, its stories, its growth. For our roots run deep, and our ambitions ring true, for we have made our mark for over 160 years. Africa is our home. We drive her growth. Join us. Be her future.
Thank you, Secretary General Wamkele Mene, for your remarks. I would like to invite Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank Group, to the stage to receive a special award, the Distinguished Economic Leadership Award, to be presented by Mr. Jean-Raymond Boulay, Vice Chairman of the CCA Board and Chairman of the Boulay Group. After, we will watch a short video by our diamond sponsors, Sun Africa and Omata Paulo.
President Lorenzo, I'm very honored to be standing here today as one of your very grateful investors in your country, sir. Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, esteemed diplomats, visionary business leaders, entrepreneurs, and distinguished guests, good morning. It is a privilege to stand before such an esteemed audience at the 17th US-Africa Business Summit in Luanda, where we come together to advance the shared vision of a stronger, more prosperous US-Africa economic partnership. Today, we celebrate Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, who, as president of the African Development Bank for the last decade, has advanced Africa's development through the bank High Five priorities, targeting critical sectors for transformative growth: Light Up, Empower Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa, most of all. By mobilizing projects in these priority sectors, as well as billions in investment, Africa's economic trajectory has been redefined, making it a more attractive destination for businesses, fostering deeper commercial engagement, stronger trade and investment flows, and mutual prosperity for the nations of Africa and its partners, including the United States. On behalf of the Corporate Council on Africa, it is with great pride that we present the 2025 Distinguished Economic Leader Award to Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. This in recognition of transformative leadership, advancing Africa's economic development and improving the lives of millions of Africans. The Board of Directors and members of Corporate Council on Africa, including the many US and African public and private sector leaders joining us today, look forward to building on your leadership, legacy, and vision, sir. Please join me now in congratulating Dr. Adesina on this well-deserved honor. Thank you.
Wow, well, thank you very much, John Raymond Bull. I'm really very touched and I'm humbled. Thank you so very much. I'm grateful. Your Excellency, Joao Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola and Chairman of the African Union, and my dear brother and friend, and you're here with your beautiful, my sister, First Lady, always elegant in an elegant country. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, my brother Mohamedou Ali Yusuf, their Ambassador Troy Fitrell, my dear sister, an incredible woman, Floriza Liza, President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa. Please give it up to her because she does a phenomenal job. Thank you, Floriza. Thank you. The CCA Chair, John Olajide, and all board members of the Corporate Council on Africa, honorable ministers, senior US government officials, business leaders, CEOs of the US and African corporations, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Africa, good morning. First, thank you very much, dear President Lourenço, for hosting this year's US-Africa Business Summit. It's always great to be here in Angola. I'd like to express my deepest appreciation to the Corporate Council on Africa for this great honor of receiving the Distinguished Economic Leadership Award. Thank you, and thank you. I will always cherish this As much as I will cherish the excellent relationship that we have built with the United States of America and the Corporate Council on Africa over the 10 years of my tenure as president of the African Development Grant Group. I'd like to thank you, Florrie, in particular John and the great team at the Corporate Council of Africa for all that you do in bringing us together to advance U.S.-Africa partnerships. Thanks again. As I receive this award, I have a message on Africa's economic opportunities and proposition. Smart investors should pay attention to Africa. African countries represent 13 out of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world. The New York Times ran a big headline that the world is becoming more African, with 1 in 4 people in the world being African. To feed the world, think Africa. That's because 65% of the uncultivated arable land left in the world is in Africa. To support global energy transition, think Africa. That is because Africa has one of the largest renewable energy potentials in the world and vast reserves of critical minerals and rare earth vital for manufacturing of computers, mobile phones, windmills, aerospace equipment, electric vehicles, and battery energy storage systems. The African Continental Free Trade Area is worth $3.4 trillion. Africa offers high rates of returns on investment. Don't believe me, believe the data. The United Nations Development Program, recent Africa Insights, Investment Insights, shows that investing in Africa gives internal rate of returns of between 15 and 20%. How about confidence of investors? And many of you are here today. Don't believe me, again, believe the data. The African Capital Markets Activity Report, released in April of 2024, shows that African fundraising more than doubled to $4 billion across 22 funds, even as global private capital fundraising fell by 19% year. That's fine. How about the risk of investing? Don't believe me, believe the data. The Moody's Analytics report on cumulative losses due to default to infrastructure globally shows that losses to Africa are 1.9%, compared to 6.6% in North America, 10.4% in Latin America, 12% in Eastern Europe, 4.6% in Western Europe, and 4.6% in Western Asia. Bottom line, Africa is the least risky in terms of investing in infrastructure. And that's why the African Development Bank has invested over $55 billion in infrastructure over the past 10 years under my presidency, making us the largest financier of regional infrastructure. The African Development Bank is a key, thank you, it's a key strategic partner with the United States, Angola, and Zambia on the development of the Lobito Corridor. This critical corridor will link the vast copper mining areas of Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the port of Angola, improve mineral supplies, unlock agricultural potentials, and create jobs. The African Development Fund will be providing, Mr. President, I'm happy to tell you today, $500 million in support of the development of the Lobito Corridor. In addition, the African Development Bank will also provide an additional $1 billion over 5 years for complementary investments in the Lobito Corridor, including agricultural value chains, roads, and energy. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we build transport corridors, let us also build strategic partnership corridors. Strategic partnership corridors between the United States and Africa. Strategic partnerships that prioritize capital investments in infrastructure, agriculture, mineral industrialization, development of digital infrastructure, as well as capital markets. Strategic partnerships for shared prosperity between the United States and Africa. And here I'm just saying, Ambassador, here, you know, we love the United States, and I just want to say that when we think about the issue of trade that the chair mentioned of the African Union, the total amount of trade of Africa with the United States is only $34 billion. It's about 1.2% of total global trade. And when you look at it in terms of the amount of trade surplus that everybody worries about, and the U.S. is right in trying to make sure that is done. But for us in Africa, it's only $7.4 billion. It's probably about 0.2%. So it's very, very small for Africa. And so what we're trying to say is that what's needed is more trade between the United States and Africa, and more trade between Africa and the United States, not less. And what is needed are more U.S. companies and U.S. capital putting capital to work in Africa. There is no nation in the world that has a greater way of making capital work than the United States, and we want that capital working here in Africa. Push it up to the United States and please welcome them. The U.S. and Africa strategic partnerships should move beyond aid to investments. That is the way to go. Act on the data, not perceptions. Think Africa. Think opportunities. Think competition. From the U.S. DFC to the U.S. Exim Bank to institutional investors and capital allocators, invest in Africa. The African Development Bank Group will be there, hand in hand with you, together with Corporate Council on Africa, and I will be, of course, your greatest champion. Today and well into the future, let's make Africa and U.S. great again together. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
When Angola's future demands strong foundations, Omatapalo delivers. Founded in 2003 with over 12,000 employees, we've built more than 1.3 million square meters of infrastructure and counting. From highways, energy and water treatment plants to housing, stadiums, and major public works, our mission is clear: to build a greater Angola. As the first Angolan construction firm to join the UN Global Compact, we lead with integrity, investing in people, communities, and sustainable growth. With a nationwide presence and projects spanning Southern Africa, Europe, and USA, Omatapalo is engineering a stronger, greener future. Omatapalo, we make it happen.
We are the largest U.S. electricity infrastructure development company. In Angola, we are delivering more than 1 gigawatt of clean solar power. Our first phase, 370 megawatts, was awarded the title of ECA DFI-backed Deal of the Year. The second phase, 504 megawatts, earned the U.S. Export-Import Bank's Deal of the Year award. Sun Africa will deliver 220 megawatts of solar mini-grids with water purification systems and 287 megawatt-hours of battery storage across 65 communities. Utility-scale solar PV generation will be grid-connected, effectively strengthening the Angolan power sector. The sun rises for everyone.
Thank you, President Adesina, and congratulations once again on a well-deserved awards. Our last but not least special remark will be delivered by Luisa Ortega, the President of Coca-Cola Africa. Please welcome her to the stage, and then we will watch a video from our diamond sponsor, Chevron, and emerald sponsor, Mitrelli.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, partners, all protocols observed. It is a privilege to be here today as we chart new pathways for shared partnership and prosperity between the countries of Africa and the United States. It's an honor to be here today on behalf of the Coca-Cola system in Africa that includes our 30 local bottling partners across the different countries in the continent. The story of Coca-Cola begins in Atlanta, in Georgia, the United States, in 1886. Coca-Cola was first served as a fountain beverage before a bottling system was developed that would bring Coca-Cola all around the world. We learned from our earliest days that our business thrived when we invested in local communities in the US and beyond. For more than 139 years, our business model has been remarkably consistent. As we expand around the world, we maintain intensely local roots in the US while also investing in the local communities where we operate. Which brings me to Africa, where I will focus in today's comments. The Coca-Cola system's journey in Africa began almost a century ago in 1928 in South Africa. Since then, we've grown into a system that operates across Africa, anchored by partnerships and with our bottlers, thousands of local suppliers, retailers, and entrepreneurs. We are deeply rooted in the communities where we operate, with a model that creates jobs, strengthens local industries, and uplifts communities. We source locally, we manufacture locally, we distribute locally, helping to build a stronger, more integrated and prosperous economies across Africa, in the US, and everywhere where we operate around the world. Our strategy in Africa reflects our global ambition to be a total beverage company, offering a diverse portfolio of beverages to meet every consumer's moment. And at the heart of it is our purpose as a company, to refresh the world and make a difference. A purpose that guides every decision we make and every partnership that we do. Today marks a milestone, the launch of our comprehensive socioeconomic impact study for the continent of Africa, conducted with global consultancy Stuart Redquin. The last time that we conducted a continent-wide study was in 1998. Today, we once again bring you the full picture on our system's social and economic impact and our confidence in Africa's future. Using advanced modeling tools, Stuart Redquin measured the Coca-Cola system impact across sectors and regions in 2024, giving us a clear and transparent view of how we contribute for national and regional development. The approach also integrated client-provided operational data with trusted third-party economic sources and industry's benchmarks. More than just measuring direct contributions, the analysis uncovered economic interlinkages, showing how the Coca-Cola system drives production, generates income, and supports employment across industries, highlighting the role and commitment to Africa's long-term growth. The results are significant. In 2024, the Coca-Cola system supported more than 1 million jobs across the value chain. Both through our direct operations as well as across the ecosystem of suppliers throughout all the different countries we operate in Africa. In addition, the system contributed $10.4 billion in added value across the value chain in the African communities. Our system spent $4.3 billion on local suppliers, representing 83% of the system's total procurement in Africa. And for every job within our system, 27 additional jobs were supported across Africa's value chain, from farms and factories to retailers and transportation. The data confirms what we've always known: the Coca-Cola system presence is very embedded into the African communities. And that's why we are doubling down, turning insights into action through bold investments that confirm our commitment to the continent of Africa. Last year, the Coca-Cola system announced $1.2 billion of investments across Africa over the next 5 years. And we are hopeful that stable and predictable policy environments will enable more investments in the months and years ahead. Additionally, we are investing $25 million by 2030 to help address critical water-related challenges in local communities across 20 African countries, to help safeguard vital watersheds and improve access to clean water by the different communities. Beyond our business operations, we are helping to build a stronger, more resilient communities as we are focused on issues such as advancing water security, evidenced by the water initiative I have just mentioned, packaging sustainability and emissions reductions, and empowering entrepreneurs across Africa. At Coca-Cola, we believe in Africa and in Africa's future. We've participated in and actively supported the growth of Africa for nearly a century. In this context, we welcome the emphasis by the United States on commercial diplomacy as a core focus to its Africa engagement. For the Coca-Cola system to continue investing on the continent, it is important to have key elements in place. Firstly, stable and predictable policy environments enable investment, and that enables growth. And also, clear and consistent frameworks around tax, trade, and regulations give businesses the assurance to plan, to invest, and to scale. As we look to the future, our one truth is clear. Africa's growth is our growth. And it will take all of us, government, civil society, businesses, and development partners, to continue the journey of this growth together. We would like to thank and acknowledge the governments represented here today. From the United States, this summit's host country, Angola, and the many governments across Africa. We are grateful, we are very grateful for your partnership in this journey in building a more prosperous and resilient Africa. Thank you very much.
"30 million square kilometers, 1.5 billion people, and home to some of the world's fastest growing economies. Chevron has been a part of Africa's energy journey for more than a century, building successful partnerships across the continent. Demand for energy has evolved. We have too. Today, as we strive for a lower carbon intensity future, Chevron is embracing both traditional and innovative technologies to power everything from bustling cities to family homes. Our West African gas pipeline transports natural gas across Nigeria to Benin, Togo, and Ghana. The Angola Liquefied Natural Gas Project exports energy around the world. We are a major contributor to Equatorial Guinea's LNG industry. And across Africa, local employees make up over 90% of our workforce. Because our most important resource will always be our people. That's why we're doing more than just business. We are strengthening communities by investing in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and more. We are empowering people. We are energizing economies. We are Chevron.
Every great thing that ever happened began as a dream. Propelled by bold dreams, visionary African leaders are transforming their nations and creating prosperity to realize Africa's potential. With rapid population growth, ambitious youth, and enormous opportunity, African nations are emerging as cornerstones of the global economy. For decades, government leaders have chosen to partner with Matrele to implement transformative, national-scale solutions. Together, we've executed more than 100 projects that provide millions with access to essential infrastructure and services. Redefining urban living with sustainable urbanization initiatives. Building self-sustaining national food agro-industries. Developing comprehensive national education systems. Delivering pioneering renewable energy solutions. Deploying advanced communication networks, and promoting accessible, quality healthcare for all. Working alongside forward-thinking governments and local communities, we bring an ecosystem of broad expertise and innovative solutions that address immediate needs while driving long-term prosperity. Our proven capabilities and strong international relationships enable us to secure project financing through diverse funding models and deliver sustainable, meaningful impact aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Africa's transformation is led by its leaders, powered by its people, and scaled by trusted partnerships. We are Matrelli, your solutions partner to transform audacious vision into sustainable reality and build a better future for generations. Matrelli, we build potential.
Thank you, Mrs. Luisa Ortega. I will now introduce our moderator for the Scene Setter Plenary, Jennifer Zabazaja, Chief Africa Correspondent and Anchor of the Bloomberg Television, and her panelists, Juvelino Domingos, Admassu Tades, Yvonne Ike, and African Development Bank presidents that I was told at last minute that will be absent, sorry. So I will leave you in good hands. Thank you from my side. Jennifer, please.
Oh, please. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I would like to welcome to the stage our three panelists for this morning. As our MC was just mentioning there, Juvelino Domingos, CFO of Banco BAI, Yvonne Ike, the Managing Director and Head of Sub-Saharan Africa at Bank of America, and also Admassu Tadesse, President and Group Managing Director for TDB Group. Please welcome them to the stage. A bit of reorganization, but we still all want you here. Please sit down. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and we've been hearing a number of speeches and addresses this morning talking about really what we've seen over the past decade or so with this relationship. But I think it was Dr. Adesina that said, act on the data, not perceptions. So I'm hoping we can do that in the next 35 or so minutes. First of all, I wanted to ask all of you how, from a private sector perspective, you're each executives in the banking industry, how would you assess the current US-Africa relationship as it pertains to trade, investment, and financial commitments? Admassu, do you maybe want to start?
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be on the panel. Very quickly, to jump into the matter at hand, I would probably say it's moderate. I would say it's moderate because the US, of course, is the largest economy in the world still, and the expectations are much higher. We've seen what US investment has done in Europe with the Marshall Plan. We've seen what it's done in Japan, South Korea. Of course, China itself is a success story because of a lot of US investment. So in that context, we know Africa has yet to receive its fair share of US investment. And I think this is why there's a lot of high expectations that have yet to be fulfilled.
Yvonne, do you want to jump in?
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. I would say that the US-Africa relationship is definitely improving. It's complex, but it is improving. And whichever way we look at it, whether we're looking at FDI flows, whether we're looking at the exports from Africa, or rather the US into Africa, and I think what's more important is the underlying trends. So we're seeing more institutions, public and private sector, doing more. It's no small feat that the DFC and the United States government is standing behind the Lobito Corridor investment. That investment, of course, also led by important financial institutions in the region, like Africa Finance Corporation, etc., and AFDB as well. So we are seeing that kind of engagement. And there is also conversation at the moment with the World Bank looking at the Inga Dam project. So there's some very transformational projects happening in Africa where we're seeing important engagement from DFC and US Exim in particular in the public sector. I want to remind all of us here today that Bill Gates Foundation has just pledged a majority of his $200 billion in his foundation to Africa to support health, to support financial inclusion, to support gender equality, and to support food security, amongst other things. So, so that across the board there are changes, and this is really driven by the necessity that Africa, or the role that Africa has as a key player in energy, technology, and infrastructure globally. There is no part of the world that is looking to develop and looking to be important. So there's no MAGA without Africa.
Juvelino, I would love for you to jump in, especially with the context, thank you so much, both of you, that we are seeing Chinese trade and investment picking up onto the continent. How does that maybe factor into the US-Africa relationship from your vantage point?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure. Of course, US is facing an increasing competition of other economic power in the continent. When we look to statistics, we see that US-Africa trade volume is around $72 billion US. Only less than 2% of total US trade volume, which means that we need to do more. And when we look to the foreign direct investment inflows from US to Africa, we see that it's less than 1% of global US foreign direct investment around the world. And these investments is mainly concentrated in extractive industries. While when we compare to China, we see that China has been the largest Africa trade partner, and Chinese firms are investing in all of the value chains in the continent, which means that this US-Africa economic relationship, although is multifaceted, encompassing trade, investment, has been relied traditionally in an aid-centric model, which means that there must be or require a greater presence of American private investments. We have AGOA, for example, that plays a central role in this relationship between US and Africa, but there is still a huge or a lot of work to do, because most African companies and countries does not underutilize AGOA, and AGOA itself must be reformulated. By reformulated, I mean must be modernized, must be extended and expanded. Yeah. Expanded because the number of countries and products eligible for export to US must increase. And extended because, by the way, it is scheduled to terminate this year in a context of uncertainty around its survival. Because in a context of tariff introductions. Yeah. And regarding tariffs, we have to see that Africa does not represent any economic threat to US. Because when we look to the statistics, we see that US trade deficit, global trade deficit is around $900 US dollar. And with Africa, this trade deficit is only $7 billion US dollar. It's only 1%, so it's very low amount, And Africa should not be treated like that in terms of tariffs. Because it is surprisingly that those countries that better utilize AGOA are those ones that face higher tariffs.
Right.
Because the way the tariffs are calculated does not take into account AGOA as an exception.
Right. I want to get into, because you brought up a few really important points that I hope we can pull apart. Admasu, though, just on some of the points here, I saw that you have said before that rhetoric is frothy and we don't always see the engagement, right, follow through. Why haven't we seen that? Does this time maybe feel different, or how do you assess this current moment right now?
Well, Jennifer, I think the potential is really strong, because if you just look at the composition of U.S. exports to Africa, it's topped by machinery, aircraft, equipment of various kinds, whether it's healthcare or agriculture, even nuclear reactors, boilers for agriculture. The U.S. wants to pick up on its own industrialization.
Yeah.
And Africa needs a great deal of equipment and machinery. It's a perfect fit. So all the U.S. really has to do is reorient its production on the industrial side and target Africa, because Africa is the only part of the world that is yet not producing significant goods of an equipment and industrial nature. Our agriculture sector, our various industries, our mining, our energy sector, we all need very large amounts of equipment. In fact, that's what TDB Group does. We finance a lot of imports of equipment for all these sectors. And so it's a natural fit for the U.S. to actually see this as not just a significant market today, but a huge market for tomorrow. And this is, of course, what has, made some of those other regions very successful today, is because they did that on the back of U.S. investment, a combination of know-how, but very much industrial goods, capital, technology. And of course, these days, technology is evolving. There's a lot more different types of technology. Again, the continent needs a great deal of that. And so there are intermediaries like US Exim and TDB and others who are willing to do it. But I just think there needs to be a little bit more business development on the side of US exporters. But the truth be told, the US also needs to kind of develop the African economy so that the African economies can effectively import more from the US. We're growing at about 4% per annum. That's quite low for a region like Africa. We could definitely hit 6-7% in general. Out of 21 of the 55 African countries are growing above 5% today. 21 African countries above 5%. Quite a number actually growing above 6%. With that growth, there's real demand behind it. Effective demand for the things that the U.S. is good for, right? The U.S. does need markets, and I think there's a rediscovery of that imperative in the U.S., and I think it's a perfect time to reset the sights of the U.S. on Africa long term. And so I think it's not a question of charity, it's a question of harnessing this huge future market that has yet to be tapped. But of course, it's not going to happen on its own, and I think this is where Africans expect the U.S. to play some kind of a long-term, self-enlightened role to build out the African economy, because it's been done for Japan, it's been done for Europe, it's been done for China, it's been done for South Korea. It's a win-win. And so all we have to do is unlock that aspect. And of course, in the case of Africa, it's quite unique, because you have 45 million Americans of African descent in one way or the other.
Yeah.
So that in its own right is a huge resource that can be used to build bridges and help, ignite this economic transformation of the continent. And igniting it will actually give the U.S. a huge return on its investment.
Thanks. Yvonne, from a bank perspective, from a U.S. bank perspective, what's the appetite for what Admasu was just speaking about there? We've seen a lot of U.S. banks. I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of all banks, but from Bank of America's perspective, what's the appetite to invest outside of just sovereign bonds and maybe into some of these sectors that we're speaking about?
I'll come to that in a minute. I do need to point out that part of the slowdown is also really us Africans and our African government organizing around the critical areas that matter. It's helpful for US to help us, but we also need to be stronger in our policy framework, especially around the sectors that matter, technology and infrastructure. Our revolution is going to come more from technology and human capital than manufacturing, and we need to organize ourselves for that. It's very important. Back to the question that you did ask me, at Bank of America, we really believe in diversifying the sources of financing in the areas that we were talking about. So whether it's, so yes, we are committed to doing more. There's a global $1.5 trillion capital commitment to galvanize capital globally, and Africa is still included in that. We are innovating around other sources of capital where countries can borrow in dollars and and pay back in other assets, whether it's gold or copper and other commodities like that. So diversifying the types of financing is very important. Putting our capital to play in areas that do matter in the sectors like technology, etc. We do that. We're working on a number of initiatives for like debt for nature swaps, for example, and structuring with governments how they can finance their debt, and also with the private sector, supporting the private sector in how they expand the sources of financing, where we sometimes catalyze it with some form of capital and then bring in other blended finance solutions to the table.
Do you agree with that, Giovellino? How do you see it from BAI's perspective?
Thank you. Well, I think as financial institution, we have to be committed to in helping African companies that want to expand their capacity and get access to other markets like US. And also help other companies that are coming from US to Africa. And you know that Africa has its own, is a sui generis continent. It has its own complexities, culture, and are very different among each country. And we have, there must be an institutional program in order to guide this mutual investment from each part. I mean, US companies does not know very well Africa because of these complexities. So there should be initiatives in order to present, actively advocate what Africa can offer to them. And also, there should be incentives to attract them to Africa. On the other hand, as a financial institution, we should look to sectors that potentiate diversification of the economies across the continent, like investing in people, infrastructure, technological transfer, and intra-trade investment, intra-Africa trade. When we talk about infrastructure, we think it comes on mind Lobito Corridor, and most people think that Lobito Corridor is only an infrastructure that will allow export of raw materials from the continent outside. But it has also the potential to potentiate intra-Africa trade, because we claim to be the largest free trade zone in the world, but the constraint is that intra-Africa trade is very low, and we have to potentiate it. And we have to go beyond Lobito Corridor, because if we compare to the ambitious initiative, they call it China Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
I think Lobito Corridor is not enough as an alternative to face these challenges. We have to think beyond that and go and think, for example, to another initiative in West Africa. Because because the need for diversification is enough. And we have to put, the partnership agenda must take into account Africa priorities aligned with US foreign policies also. So that both American and African companies can have the necessary support for them to help the continent to diversify their activities.
Thank you for that. I was just told we're running short of time, so I do want to make sure we cover just a few more topics. I want all of you to speak about, because a few of you have touched on debt and this focus on debt, because that is a part of the conversation, right, inevitably. Admaso, if you can, from TDB's perspective, how do you see African alliances and institutions like TDB, like AFDB and others? Is there more that can be done to support institutions on the continent, coming from the World Bank, the IMF, even the Paris Club, that in many ways did convince many countries to borrow and got us into the situation here? How do you see this current situation? Because that will ultimately lead to prosperity for the continent.
Thank you, Jennifer. A very topical question you're asking. Maybe first of all, it's just useful to bear in mind that the debt issues that are often referred to in the African context is very different from the previous crisis. Debt to GDP in the continent is about 65%. But if you look at a lot of the debt that's been incurred in Africa, it's actually been to finance real assets, productive assets. So it's not just debt that came out of nowhere and there's nothing to show for. And normally when you do financing, you want to see that there's something that's been created with that debt. So Africa is asset rich over the past 10 to 20 years with a lot of the debt that's been incurred. So that first of all should keep people calm, that it's not just a bubble sitting on nothing, right? Of course, what has happened is global macros have shifted quite sharply over the past few years, ever since COVID. Inflation became what it was. And of course, financing costs started to really get spiked up. And that has created stress. And of course, a number of countries found themselves in very, very difficult circumstances. And they had to find a way to restructure. And it's actually a healthy thing to do. And that's why institutions like TDB, for instance, have been very happy to support these countries with restructuring, the same way the Paris Club has, the same way other groups of lenders have. And so there's just been a lot of unhealthy noise around it because it took time to build consensus to get to those points of restructuring. I think the one thing, though, that's very problematic is the way that some of these processes have been handled. And I think the reason it's been messy and it's been generating a lot of noise is because, the global financial process has not taken adequate consideration of African lenders in the process. So Africa, if you go back 20 years, apart from the African Development Bank, there was hardly any major significant African financial institution. Today, there's TDB, there's Afrexim Bank, there's AFC, there's about 8, 9 of us. And some of these restructurings happen and we're not consulted. We're not in the picture, and it happens as an afterthought. Assumptions are made, and those assumptions are wrong. And by the time you get a chance to inform some of these circles that are discussing the matters, it's too late because already decisions have been made, and nobody wants to open up decisions that have been made. But nobody wants to own up to the fact that decisions were made without adequate information from the African side of the equation. It happened with the Chinese too, from what I remember. There was restructurings, the Chinese were excluded and things didn't happen. Processes were stuck for 2 years. And so finally they were brought into the mix and things started to happen. But Africans were not brought into the room to discuss, and we ourselves are significant creditors. And so there's been a little bit of a disappointment on that side. We're dealing with it, we're moving forward. Refinancing is the way to go as well. And we're trying to find partners who join forces with us to help refinance these positions that are difficult in some of our member states. So the posture is a very constructive one. It's a very manageable one, but we do need everybody to get to the table and to face the realities and get the facts out, because sometimes the facts get left out of the equation because of assumptions. And this is where Africans get very upset, is because sometimes you're labeled or people make, remarks about your institution, but the truth is they never bothered to ask. So you say, well, you know how to reach us. Why don't you just pick up the phone and ask? And so these are the issues around the global financial architecture that a lot of Africans are really unhappy about, because it's not about commitment, it's not about content, it's about process. And anybody who knows finance, process is so important, right? You need to be able to get that engagement going so that we can hammer out consensus, hammer out solutions, because there's no question about commitment. That is there, but it's a question of how you get to that commitment. And it's about being invisible in the rooms where decisions are being taken, and I think this is where there's work to be done. But all said and done, I think it's very important to give credit to institutions like the World Bank Group that have been amazing partners for us in the development financing that we did. Last week we were in Cape Town and we announced several loans and grants to private sector companies from Europe and also from the UAE that's actually helping electrify millions of Africans as part of the Mission 300 initiative. The reason TDB was able to do a big part of that is because we had strong partnerships with the World Bank Group that has really become a very, very progressive institution that really is working with African institutions. And I think that's an example for the others to follow. And I like to give credit where it's due, but there's other global institutions that don't consult us or engage us properly.
Are you confident that this will be resolved? Because ultimately, this will, again, it will really make a difference in terms of economic prosperity in some of these countries that have debt overhangs to move forward.
And in the end, what's important is to preserve some important principles along the way. It doesn't help trying to address a debt crisis by downgrading everybody in the process and making everybody's cost of financing much higher. And then the refinancing solutions become even more difficult. And this is what's sometimes amazing, that you would think institutions that are very specialized in these matters don't think about that. They don't think about consequences. They don't think about tomorrow. It's tough enough as it is. Cost of financing is very high in Africa. Downgrading African sovereigns, downgrading African financial institutions, it doesn't make sense. But that's what's happening. And all sorts of assumptions are made, and you find that there's a lack of coherence on some of these, medium-term issues, long-term issues, financial architecture issues. I think this is why the African Union chairperson in his initial remarks today talked about that, and it's not just about people being political or making noise for the sake of it. These things, result in very large numbers of scarce foreign exchange going out in debt servicing. Africans don't want to default. Africans want continued access to capital markets. And we know that that's what the world wants. They want Africa to graduate from development financing so we can start financing our own development. But we won't be able to do that if we get continually put under such extreme pressure that we're actually forced to default. So you actually become you fulfill that prophecy where you will default because the conditions that you're placed under are so onerous, and then in the end you end up defaulting. We see what happens all around the world. People refinance. You don't have to default. But if you're shut off from capital markets, if your cost goes up through the roof, refinancing becomes very difficult. We see Africans who are rated no different from borrowers in Latin America or Eastern Europe, but we pay a huge premium.
Right.
And that's what puts unbearable burden on some of these entities.
Thank you for that. Before we wrap up, Yvonne, let's just build on what Admasu was telling us there, and also link it back as well to this U.S.-Africa partnership. What will be contingent on the shared prosperity staying intact over the next few years? Is it tackling some of these issues that we've talked about here? Is it geopolitical developments that will ultimately decide on where this relationship goes? How does this remain intact?
The truth is, Africa's development still needs a lot of debt, hundreds of billions. Africa's development still needs a lot of debt, hundreds of billions of dollars of debt. What we are seeing and are supporting is domestic debt capital mobilization. And that is a very important catalyst and tool for funding debt in the future. Today, sub-Saharan Africa debt in the public markets, well, between 2022 and 2024, rose from an average of 16% to 18%. It's unsustainably high. So at Bank of America, we're very, very focused at working on structures that lower the cost of borrow, extend the maturity, and diversify the sources of borrowers, lenders coming into it, usually from the investor market. And that is very, very important, that we continue to focus on how we can reduce the cost of debt and how we can extend the maturity of debt profile. So that support in creating the fiscal space is important, which is why we do need to have, we also look at, which is why we also look at other forms of borrowing which are becoming more important. And of course, in that, insurance and guarantees, that is where we really do need help. At Bank of America, we're working with international organizations, including World Bank, including DFC, to make sure, and global insurance companies around the world, we're seeking those pockets of capital where they are having low yields, low returns, and they can deploy that capital into Africa. Our default rates are actually relatively low. And even with refinancing and restructuring, let's get this into perspectives. Of the 54 countries, a handful of them have had to go into restructuring. Ghana did it successfully. There are other countries that are also working through that. So there are opportunities. We do have the tools that are being used to make sure that we can access more debt in the future.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Could have spoken to you for a longer time, but please join me in thanking our panelists for this opening session.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We're going to do a short break for 5 minutes, and then Richard Quest from CNN is coming with other panelists. Vamos fazer então pequeno intervalo, mas será mesmo pequeno, é de 5 minutos, e depois o jornalista da CNN, Richard Quest, virá aqui com os seus entrevistados.